Right, welcome everyone to our next podcast. Today we've got Chris Ridge in today from Kingspan.
Hi, Jake.
Yeah, nice to see you, mate.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Obviously what we want to get out of today is what is the importance of insulation, what it means for contractors, and what is the future in this market, for particularly insulation and pipe supports. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself, a bit of your background, your credentials?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Chris Ridge. I work for Kingspan Technical Installation. My role is National Business Development Manager. I've been with Kingspan best part of 10 years now, and I've been in the wider M&E market for best part of 20 years. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. So you've been around the block a few times then, so to speak.
Thank you. Yes, it's true.
I've heard all about you, mate.
But an easy paper round apparently, so there we are. So yeah.
Okay, well thanks for joining us today, Chris. Really much appreciated. We've got some questions as we normally do. Try and pick your brains, teach us some stuff. So from a first fix point of view, obviously making allowances for insulation on pipe supports can sometimes be a bit of an issue for the contractor. So what's the actual purpose there, and how can we overcome those potential issues?
Yeah, so traditionally M&E contractors will be certainly experienced with the use of an insulated pipe support block in terms of mitigating against condensation issues effectively. I think we've already looked in terms of some of the water taken out of the fridge, and obviously, as we appreciate, effectively when you got cold water in a warm environment, so piped chilled water, for example, you will get a build-up of condensation. And effectively, what the pipe support block allows us to do is to maintain a complete vapor seal. So that includes where the actual pipe clip is, so right through the pipe clip, so you get a vapor seal, you don't get the condensation issues. And that is one of the key roles of an insulated support block. More and more now, insulated blocks are being used to mitigate against issues of heat transfer as well. So when we consider a heating or hot water pipe, for example, then having a block in place stops that transfer that you would naturally get from the clip being on the pipe work and going straight up the threaded rod as well. So the pipe support from an M&E contractor point of view is the bit that they need to consider before the thermal insulation contractor goes and does the rest of the job, which is obviously the key part of the insulation job as well. So
Okay. So we mentioned that it can be problematic. Is there other ways it could be an issue from a contractor's point of view, maybe from an install point of view? Is there a should this be considered earlier on to account for any potential insulation issues, rather than more of like a retrofit kind of?
Yeah, I suppose the problem you've got with something like an insulation block, as it were, is if you don't allow for that in the early design process, and you've just you've installed your pipe work, and the only concern you've got at the end of that is just lagging it, as it were. Actually, it's very difficult to go back and sort of retrofit a better situation. So yeah, it needs to be considered at early stages. The size of the block needs to marry up with the size of the insulation. The size of the insulation is dictated by a number of factors, and for example, British standards BS 5970 is the British standard that gives every manufacturer, as it were, the watts per meter heat losses or heat gains that their product needs to effectively be recorded against. So you have to take into account the thermal performance of your product, and you have to then say, for that particular application, it needs to be this thick to meet the heat loss or heat gain requirements. So there's a lot of information in the system that needs to be accounted for, but ultimately that transfers then down to the size of the block that you need. If that's wrong and it doesn't marry up, then there's potentially issues to follow there.
Yeah.
So it's a small part of the entire installation, of course, but it's one that if it's not done right at early stages, it can be.
There's another thing I think we briefly touched on it before. Actually, you did teach me this. The when we've got the
I wonder what this is going to be then.
It was proving the vapor seal, and when you've got the galv sleeve. Yeah, I've seen previously with some in other businesses where the galv sleeve's overhanging. But we mentioned that's incorrect, and it makes sense actually, because how do you prove visually that is butted up against it, so to speak,
Of course. So the key point of having an insulation block on a below ambient application is to make sure that it marries up to the insulation, and it can be taped and completely vapor sealed. If you have something that prevents that vapor seal from happening, so something that doesn't allow that access to that point, that can be a problem. Also, how do you actually as a clerk of works, or somebody checking from a consultant basis, or what have you, how do you actually check that has actually been taped anyway, if there's something covering that? So absolutely. That
it's as good as its weakest point, isn't it? Basically.
I think essentially what the issue can be, that the mechanical fixings package is very much seen as a separate package to the pipe insulation package, and then what sometimes doesn't happen is that those two areas don't marry up, as it were, and that can be the problem. So this is where a company like Kingspan do like to have the early engagement with contractors and consultants, and make sure that whatever is in the specification is adhered to on site right through that process, and then the problems don't happen. If you can maintain a vapor seal, that's half your battle on chill pipe work. And again, we'll probably talk about the above ambient applications as we go forward, but it absolutely it's all part of having that whole system and making it work for you.
Okay, good stuff. Okay. All right. So we might have briefly touched on the next point anyway. So we'll talk a bit more about the insulation itself and what drives the specification of it. So you mentioned earlier, depending on temperatures and things like that, which dictates the thickness and whatnot. But should we go a bit more into that and elaborate a bit?
Yeah, if that's okay, that'd be great. Yeah. So I think we've already covered off some of the issues in terms of vapor barriers and condensation control. But I think going forward, and I think this was, we're looking at the future of the insulation market as a general topic, and I think the massive concern that I think we all have in terms of the environmental impact of construction. I think we all want to see a world where we can achieve real reduction in carbon, and actually get to this government. It's now government mandated situation, is it, where we're going to have net zero carbon buildings by 2050. There's a whole load of different factors that are going to be involved in that, but certainly insulation is one of those, and I think 2050 still seems such a long distance in time. I'm not going to try and think about how old I'm going to be in 2050.
I'm just trying to think that myself then. But it's not far. It's not too far away.
Exactly. When we look, I mean, just very briefly harkening back to British standards for pipe insulation, the last update in British standards was in 2009. We're overdue a 10-year renewal of those standards. That's 10 years, and not a lot of change since the 2001 British standard example. So actually, we're moving towards a system or a situation where, 10 years is going to go quite quickly, and if we don't up our game in terms of the performance of HVAC systems, that's going to be a real problem. So, taking it in 10-year chunks, for example, by the end of 2030, there's a real move now to try and ensure that all buildings that are built by 2030 are all net zero carbon. And when you think about it, that gap, that 20 years between 2030 and 2050, that gives us 20 years to retrofit all the remaining buildings. That's still a heck of a task. So I think the idea of being ready for this in terms of all buildings that are coming out of the ground are net zero carbon in 2030, whether we're ready for that or not is something we've all got to try and keep close to the front of our minds, I think. But actually not doing it means I don't think we're going to reach those targets. So it should
it's not
be
going away, is it?
No. So apologies, that was probably a bit more of a general overview of what's driving insulation, but driving so many other things, of course. But
Sorry. Well, on that basis, obviously, like you said, we need to be net zero by 2050. So, what else are you, for our Kingspan doing towards that?
Okay. Yeah.
I know we briefly touched on it there. Or not necessarily. What role would insulation, as such, what role does that? How important is that towards that net zero?
Yeah, so
obviously it must play some kind of, a big role, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer the second question in that respect, and what it means in terms of pipe insulation and ducting insulation and so forth. So when we look at embedded carbon, there's two factors, and when we look at net zero carbon, there's two factors. One being embedded carbon, and the other being the energy performance of the building, of course. Now, quite frankly, bad pipe insulation means that we lose a lot of energy, and we promote a lot of heat losses on heating and hot water systems, and that is a problem that I think, because of the thermal performance of Cooltherm, which is our product that we effectively market for the HVAC sector. The benefit of it is that it has this embedded thermal performance.
Yep.
It's better than most other insulants in the market, and certainly the best option as a HVAC insulant. What that means is that using Kingspan, you can first of all you can achieve better thermal performances with less. What we've discovered, and this might be an area that we talk about as well, certainly what we've discovered with the district heating market and the growth of that sector, is that if you don't insulate correctly, you have issues of overheating. And these are real world issues. These are issues where apartment builds and residential sort of assisted living buildings and things like that are having genuine issues with overheating in corridors and risers. Now, it's not just the problem for the occupant as such.
Yeah.
It's also the
It's
sheer
funny you
amount
say
of
that about
energy.
corridor. I just thought that I remember going off on a bit of a tangent.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, when he was at uni in Manchester, I remember in his halls this corridor was so hot.
Yeah.
And actually at the time, no one could. It must have been something to do with that. Do you reckon it was?
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, what you have, particularly when you're connecting onto a heat network or you've got central plant, is that you've typically got pipe work running at 75 degrees for your heating. Your heating scenario, and maybe somewhere around 60 degrees for your hot water. You can imagine the difference between properly lagged pipe work and unlagged pipe work in that situation. And quite frankly, that pipe, if it's not correctly insulated, it's belching out all of this heat. So and you can tie that back absolutely to the energy performance of the building, and you can tie it back to somebody somewhere is footing the bill for those costs, as it were. You know, we did a study, and it forms part of a CPD seminar that we do actually on an assisted living scenario, and we can show that by going beyond the British standards, as already laid out earlier, then the British standards, nothing has really changed massively in 20 years. I think there's a big move towards upping the game with insulation now, and what we can show is that taking it further, enhancing your insulation thicknesses has a huge effect on the building performance.
Yeah, sure. So would you say it's looking towards the end of the road for wood blocks then? Sorry, mate, I had to throw that in there. I mean, I'm thinking more for this net zero carbon by 2050. Surely that might have, I would think you'd see less and less of that going forward. It may, if this is what needs to be done.
Yeah. So I mean,
it's inevitable, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. So when you look at wood blocks, for example, as an insulant, which is ultimately what they're bought in to do as such, as an insulant, they're about 10 times worse than having a Kingspan insulated block, for example. So you're not getting the properties out of that you'd expect. Whether it's the biggest problem on a site is another thing. For example, valve mats and valve covers, insulating a valve is really important. So one valve is effectively, I think the Carbon Trust data shows this, but one uninsulated valve is effectively equivalent to 1 metre of uninsulated pipe. So having a valve cover in place is a fantastic place to start. Certainly looking at insulation thicknesses and upping those thicknesses on heating and hot water is something that shows fantastic results as well. But yeah, ultimately having the best possible insulant around the pipe support or underneath the pipe support, restricting that from the pipe work, and again having that clip away from the pipe work so you don't have that direct transfer from metal to metal, and indeed using something that is an actual insulant rather than something that doesn't really have those insulation properties.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm guessing you'd have to overcompensate, wouldn't you, if they were, as in the thickness of it?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you here's something that again it's worth fact checking, because I can only go with the general conversation that we had, but we actually did a little bit of a thought process on what it would mean to, for example, if you were going to take a wood block and have it perform to the same insulation levels as a cool therm block. Yeah. We worked out on a 2-inch pipe you would need something like a 20 mil for this particular scenario. You'd need a 20 mil cool therm block, but you'd actually need like a 2 metre wood block.
Wow.
Nobody looks at it in thermal performance terms, and that's probably if you did, it would be you'd have to go to
with some pretty big risers.
Yeah, you probably need to go to the Forest of Sherwood and find Robin Hood's old tree and chop that down for the sheer thickness of wood that you would need. But yeah, but it's never seen in those terms. But I think again, we're looking at a world now where everything is being viewed in energy performance terms, and this really matters. It matters for the next 30 years, and trying to get to a point where it's a good world to live in for our children. And
100%.
So I didn't mean to play the children are our future card, but but yeah.
But it's true that they are. It's definitely, we've got to think of them, haven't we? If we're not doing something now, I think we talked about it before.
Yeah.
Imagine when our kids are older and there's a major problem, like, Dad, why didn't you do that then? Why wasn't you shouting about it? And I think, like I said, it's things like this. It is important.
We're all playing small parts, aren't we? Ultimately, but if the whole world is moving towards a better place, and the part we can play can matter, I think that's the important thing. And I think it brings us almost back around to the roles that we all play and how we can all kind of take responsibility for our own individual areas, and how we maybe have early engagement with M&E contractors, and hopefully that can matter more going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Next question for you.
Yeah. Okay.
So obviously, with at Midfix, we're doing a lot with offsite modules. Again, I suppose it's another way of reducing carbon in a way. We're solving a lot of the issues offsite.
Yeah.
So when it gets to site, it's good to go. It can plug straight in, so to speak.
Yeah.
But where do you see you guys, or Kingspan or Phenolic fitting in with that?
I think we are seeing a genuine growth in the modular market now. I would say in the best part of 2 decades that I've been involved in the M&E market, then we've seen offsite being touted, and then it kind of comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes.
Yeah.
I think now this is.
It's like it's fully accepted. Like there's a few that you need to be converted, so to speak. But it's definitely more so in the industry now, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I can see real advantages with it, and I think again when we're talking this, I'm going to say sort of post-COVID, not that we're post-COVID, but post-non-COVID world, shall we say? I think there's clear advantages in terms of the amount of people that are needed in one area at a time for installation purposes and things like that. So you can see why companies are looking at the off-site model more. I think the issues come in with it when there's a slight lack of coordination, as it were, between off-site and on-site. And I guess what I mean by that, in my own personal experience of it, is that obviously a number of M&E contractors are looking at the off-site model, and they will be taking on projects in various areas of the country. They may have their preferred geographical area where they may have an off-site plant, or they may have partners that they work with, but ultimately coordination between what happens off-site and what happens on-site can sometimes be quite the challenge. Very often I'll probably notice it from a manufacturing point of view, because, for example, something as small in the overall process, shall we say, as pipe insulation, if the off-site facility is using one type of insulant, and then the on-site they put that out to a thermal contractor who uses another type of pipe insulation, and then there is a site coordination issue or some kind of problem going forward, then to me, having the early conversations and ensuring a process where one type of insulation is used is surely that could be along a whole list of different products that are used between applications, of course, but surely there's potentially a drop in of the ball there if you're using different products, and how do you go about pulling that apart? Should there be a need to investigate an installation, if you like, post installation?
Yeah.
So back to early engagement, I think.
Yeah. I was going to say. So you say early. How early for you guys is it best to be involved, and who would you speak to actually? Who's the most influential? Is it the installer? Is it the principal contractor? Is it the consultant?
That's a really good question, and my answer is
all of the above.
The most important people who are ever maybe listening to this podcast at this particular time, of course. But it is literally everybody. But actually, I think there's been a reluctance in manufacturing to step away from the traditional. If you like, that structured route to market, that natural sort of product flow from manufacturing to distributor to contractor, and more and more we have to, as a manufacturer, actually not just take into account if you like, the flow of product to market, but we actually have to take that right back to the initial steps, and the client and the consultant are increasingly more important. A lot of what is driving our business now is early engagement with consultants and energy services companies, because the whole carbon reduction, energy saving mantle, they're the ones that are taking that on initially. The key thing then is how we take that specification that is written with the right intentions and ensuring that manages its way all the way through. And I think hopefully things like this and engagement with M&E contractors, understanding what they need to work to, and what their issues are, and seeing it all the way through helps. And of course, not forgetting the really important people that are installing the insulation at the end. You know, there's some fantastic companies that do make thermal insulation. It is a trade, it's an art of sorts. You know, it's it's one where people, you know, that there are courses, there are qualifications for pipe insulation, and indeed the thermal contractors, the big thermal contractors and the forward-looking contractors are certainly already part of the trade association for thermal contracting, and put their apprentices through the necessary training, and so again that reflects right at the other end of things in terms of the final installation. But yeah, seeing it all the way through is the key. So
it's got to police the whole thing, haven't you, I suppose? Even though it's written in the spec, you'd think it's kind of, you know, it is adhered to, and it is majority, but you have to ensure, I suppose, that, you know, there's no cutting corners. And
I think what we've got to arrive to with this, if you like, this changing world as such, is that when price becomes the key concern, then what is potentially being missed out. So if for example a contractor can submit a cheaper insulation, but it doesn't meet all the thermal properties that the specified insulation does, somebody's saving money, but it's not the client, it's not the consultant acting on behalf of the client. So somebody saving money somewhere doesn't mean that the job is better. So
there's been proof of that, hasn't there?
Yeah.
You know,
it's this whole thing with value engineering. Value engineering, when done correctly, is an important process, but a lot of it is not that, I guess. So to protect our business, of course, where we're specified, we do like to hopefully work in a positive manner with everybody in that chain. But it's all about that, and hopefully when we see that through to a building that's built with all the right materials in it, that meets all the criteria that it should do, and the people in that building are happy, and they can go about their business, whether they're living there, working there, whatever they're doing, they're happy in that building.
So of course. Right, and Chris, so yourself as a manufacturer, us as distributors, obviously the installers, how do we tie all that together to we make sure that it's all working, we're all doing our bit, and we all gel and come together?
Okay, well, look, Jake, I think stuff like this helps, doesn't it? We're talking now. We're talking about the future and what our places are as respective manufacturers and distributors.
Yep.
I think, as we've already said, early engagement with contractors, understanding their needs and what's driving them, but also making sure that the design parameters, the specifications are getting adhered to as well. I think this is where we're seeing lots of phones going off, Jake.
Sorry about that. This is live podcasting for you. Proves I'm busy, mate.
Well, mine hasn't gone off at all, has it? So we'll never mind. I think it is on silent. So there you go. But back to the question. So early engagement.
Yeah, it's key, isn't it?
Yeah, and as I say, we've all got our individual parts are small parts in the overall process, but they all count. And ultimately, if we can all work together and we can reflect what the initial design parameters are, as long as those design parameters are good, then it means we stand a chance of everybody living in a better building and working in a better building and effectively meeting these targets that we've been set. So early engagement, definitely.
Yeah. No, bro, it's the same with us. Like I said, even with the, particularly with some of the off-site in the modules we're doing, if it's thought of as an afterthought, it's very difficult. Do you know what I mean? There's things already in place on site. Then it could be a logistical issue, for example. Yeah. If it's not thought of at the start, it's the same with yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. So many problems can be solved. I mean, hopefully, again, I talk about this in the same approach as offsite, but BIM, building information modelling or management, or I think you can sort of swap the abbreviations around, as it were. But effectively, that could play a huge role going forward if we have
think so.
Yeah, if it's designed correctly and all the parameters are there in the drawings, and that down to the detail of the lights and the door handles and all the rest of it. Yeah. Who's manufacturing it, the lifespan of that product, and all of the detail there.
It's like one giant live tech sub, isn't it? It's like it's all in there. We'll get there. I think we will get there
at some point. As you say, we'll. There's so much to do, isn't there? But it's an exciting time.
So much to do, so little time.
Too right, Jake. Yeah. But an exciting time to be part of building services, I think. And,
definitely.
So
leading the change.
Let's hope so. That's what we want, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
Chris, again, thank you ever so much for coming today. It's nice to have a fellow West Midlander and that lovely Black Country accent of yours.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I think we're from the
similar neck of the woods.
Yeah. Maybe on either side of the Black Country Birmingham divide nowadays. But absolutely. So it's nice to speak to somebody that maybe won't embarrass me too much with my otherwise very Black Country accent. It probably tempers that down a little bit, doesn't it? Having a fellow West Midlands person on.
Thanks for that, mate. And so, if someone wants to find a bit more information, Chris, on this, where can we point them to?
Yep. So our website is www.kingspaniinsulation.co.uk.
Good stuff. Okay. Yeah. I hope you all enjoyed that. Listen out for our next podcast. This. It's been emotional.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks again,
Chris. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
No worries. Cheers, mate. Bye bye.